Welcome back to Harbaugh. Some of the hottest races in the country this year are going to be in the South. Robert Stein is a pollster in Houston. He's also, more importantly, the dean of the School of Social Sciences at Rice University. Thank you, Bob, for joining us, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I didn't realize until I got down here the other day how many races are hot down here. Let's talk about the Tom DeLay race. Until recently, majority leader. Does he have any real problem beating a Democrat?
I think so. I think that there are two reasons why he does. One is that his base from 204 has defected. About half of that base from 204 tells us now they'll vote for another candidate, Democrat or Republican. Another half of that group is undecided. But more importantly, he's not only have a Democratic opponent, who's himself a former congressman, Nick Lampson, but he's running against another former Republican congressman. Steve Stockman has said that he'll run as an independent. It remains to be seen whether they'll stay in there. But at this point, I'd say his re-election is at least ambiguous, if not a toss.
But Lampson's ran in another district, got defeated in another district, moved into this district for this election. Is that going to hurt him?
Well, that's very true. And it's always the case that when you move into a new district, you are new. But keep in mind, 20 to 25% of the vote in this district, he used to represent in his own
but he lost that 20, 25%.
No question he lost it, but he's familiar. And before people can vote for you, they have to know who you are. I think the real issue here is that Nick Lampson can win this race, but only against Tom DeLay. Any other Republican probably holds on to the seat.
Why would a Republican district elect a Democratic congressman?
Simply because that choice will be between incumbent Tom DeLay, possibly Steve Stockman, a former congressman, and Nick Lampson. Nick Lampson's probably good for 40, 45%. In a two-person race, it takes 50% plus one. But in a three-way race, you could end up with a candidate with 45% of the vote, and that would be a plurality victory. And I think clearly someone like Stockman, if he should stay in the race, can bleed 10, 15 points away from Congressman DeLay.
So he's like a Ross Perot.
Absolutely.
Conservative third party. If you had to put $100 on this, where would you put it?
I wouldn't. I'm not that kind of betting person.
Okay, let me ask you about Tennessee. We've got Harold Ford, a longtime congressman, son of a congressman, very well known in national media circles, very attractive, right? Running in Tennessee. Can he win the general?
That's a tough one. That's an African-American running against, well, we don't know who the first seat is an open seat if he should run for the presidency. It said so. It's not clear that that's an easy seat, but nonetheless, that's a border state. That's Al Gore's state. It's a state that should have stayed in the Democratic column. I'd say that is clearly a toss-up. Charlie Cook lists it a toss-up. I'd say a lot depends on who that Republican nominee is.
If they pick somebody far right, it'll help Ford.
Absolutely. You've got some big cities. You have big African-American vote. And most importantly, you've got an east and a west divide there. And the Democrat can sneak in there. But again, it's going to have to be the right Democrat. And Ford clearly could be the right Democrat depending on who he's running against.
Do you trust white people when they mark down in a poll of how they're going to vote where there's a black person in the race? Do they tell honest? I've seen in states like California where Tom Bradley ran twice, supposedly going to win for governor twice. White people lie. They tell the pollster they're going to vote for Bradley because they're Democrats. Then they don't do it. Doug Water was supposed to win by 13 points for governor of Virginia. He won by 1. Again, 12% of the vote were white people who lied.
It's very hard for pollsters to get Anglo voters to tell us how they're going to vote when there's a contested race with an African American. Furthermore,
why don't they tell the truth to pollsters? Why do they care?
I think to some extent it's
They're
a question.
Embarrassed?
I think socially acceptable answers. People feel as if there's an expectation that they should say a certain type of answer. I think there's a tendency also with polling to get people who feel as if they're, so to say, being tested rather than being asked.
Do you think if we didn't have squeaky clean pollsters calling up, "Hello, sir, I wonder who you're voting for," in almost an English accent, if we had a sort of a country tough guy call, an Archie Bunker voice, "Who are you going to vote for in this race?" Would you get a different reaction from a regular voice than a sophisticated voice?
Let me say this: that respondents, particularly African-American respondents, we know this from research, know who's interviewing them. African-Americans.
If they figure it's a black voice on the phone, they'll give a different,
My
more honest
colleague Dick
answer.
Murray and I will pay a lot of attention to when we're interviewing, whether we're interviewing in large Hispanic or African-American areas, and we will use the appropriate interviews.
Sure. A lot of people don't have accents, though. They don't give it away.
Well, in the South here, some of us think that I have an accent.
Well, okay. Let me ask you about Katherine Harris. Everybody knows her, St. John Knits. She's parodied on Saturday Night Live, like other people are. Is she too volatile to... she's running for Senate against Bill Nelson.
Well, again, I don't follow Florida politics that closely. I think there are two things to remember about that Florida race. Nelson's the incumbent. Incumbency has a big advantage. He has no negatives in the state. Democratic registration now outnumbers Republican registration. Has since about 2002, 2003. That's a turnout vote. If you get the turnout, I think...
Wait a minute. Well, how come everybody down there is a Republican?
Well, it's not everybody.
The governor, the senators?
That's an interesting question, and look at the turnout rates.
Well, they say they're Democrats, but they vote Republican.
Well, of course, when you're turning out voters and you have a core Democratic vote that doesn't turn out, that's one of the problems. If you win elections, it's really very simple.
I love
you
it.
get more votes than somebody else.
One of the people that's on hardball an awful lot is Trent Lott. He got knocked off the leadership by Frist, but he's apparently pretty popular in the Senate. He's a win for the Republicans.
Oh, absolutely. I think the greatest news for the Republicans in Mississippi was Trent Lott was running. That could have been a toss-up state. His decision to stay in at some personal expense, he lost his home. That'll help.
High question. A lot of African Americans went out of Louisiana, New Orleans, after the flood, after Katrina. Are they coming back to vote? And if not, is that going to hurt the Democratic governor?
No question. You had almost 300,000 voters in just New Orleans leave. Many of them are here in Texas, Arkansas, and other places. Some are still in Baton Rouge and other places. If they don't come back and they don't turn out, you could easily see the governor, lieutenant governor, a Senate race. That could become more than just a nominal Republican state. Democrats could lose big.
Well, thank you very much. Professor Robert Stein of Rice University.